Hi students, I am Father Johnson of New Catholic Mission School, Jhabua. Today we are going to see another poem from English core of class 12th from the book Flamingo. And the name of the poem is Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. Now before we go to the poem, let us try to see something about the poet Pablo Neruda, who lived between the year 1904 to 1973. This name is his pen name, but his original name is Neftali Ricardo Reyes Bestalo from Chile. He studied French and pedagogy at University of Chile in Santiago. The Spanish Civil War and the murder of Garcia Lorca affected him strongly and made him join the Republican movement. His visit to Burma, Ceylon, Java, Singapore, Buenos Aires, Barcelona, and Madrid carried a great impact on his poetic production. Now, let us try to understand this poem verse by verse. The first verse. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. The poem seeks to rise above racial and linguistic differences. This attempt towards inclusion is seen in the opening lines of the poem. The speaker employs the collective we, the pronoun we, to begin the exercise of keeping quiet. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. The count till 12 may be interpreted as signifying the 12-hour mark of the clock from which the two hands circle in a monotonous manner, very much like the daily activities of life. So, the poet is trying to persuade the people, asking the people, let us be quiet, let us keep our differences in terms of language, caste, color, creed. Let us keep the differences away and let us be united. We all will keep quiet, and it's not for 1 or 2 hours, he says for 12, meaning he wants the people to keep quiet for longer period and try to introspect their life. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. Now, let us see. It is very noteworthy that the fact that keeping quiet is as much about staying silent as it is about staying still, which is why the poem advocates for a ceasing of words and action. So keeping quiet is not just, it doesn't mean just being silent. It's not sometimes we are silent but internally we are disturbed. The poet advocates, let us be really quiet. Let us understand, let us try to be calm and quiet, and let us try to experience the inner serenity, calmness, peace within ourselves. Let us stay away from words and actions. Thoughts are the fruit of words and actions are the fruit of thoughts. So let us keep away from all type of words, thoughts and actions. Language brings differences. Now why he says let us keep away from the languages? Because language brings differences, and he says let us do away with all these differences. The great number of languages on the face of the earth seem to highlight the ways in which we are different from others. The use of the words any language suggests that the speaker recognizes the limits of language and envisions a state beyond the domain of language itself, that is, the realm of silence. So, language can bring differences, it can divide us, it can limit us. But then he says, let us, beyond the language, beyond the words of any language, let us be silent. Keeping quiet then is also about letting our differences dissipate in the silence of our similarities. We are all human beings. That which binds all of us is that we are human beings. Our color, caste, creed, language, that all these things, they divide us. So that's why he says, keep away all our differences and let us be spending time in calmness. The moving of arms not only harks back to the endless movement of the hands of the clock, but also to the gesture of restlessness and aggression which the modern world is obsessed with. Now, I have tried to highlight this word arms. This is what? It is a pun. It's a figure of speech that is called a pun. Pun means you say one thing, but it can mean two different things. Now here arms. One meaning of arm is the hand. Another meaning of arm is the arms and ammunitions, the weapon. So that's why it says, let us cease all our thoughts and spend time in total silence, and let us not move our arms, meaning let us not get into any type of action. Also let us keep away, refrain from any type of use of arms and ammunitions. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. So now what is the meaning of exotic? It is very, very rare, very rare. This hectic pace of a busy life is what makes silence an exotic moment. Now we are all 24 hours, the human beings are involved in some type of activities, and there is no time for ourselves. We don't sit quiet and reflect about our life. We don't introspect, and that is why he says, if at all we indulge in such type of silence, it will be an exotic moment, a moment which is very, very rare, very hardly seen. And like the clock, our lives have become utterly mechanical, dominated by rush and engines. Now the clock keeps moving. Like the clock, our life also has become totally mechanical. We are always obsessed with some sort of movement, activities, action. So that's why he says, let us keep away from rush, being in a state of pace, and also let us refrain from any type of movements like that of an engine. A moment of silence will not only be delightful and rare, that is exotic, but also a strange one. This is because we have internalized rush to such an extent that silence, though enjoyable, has become unfamiliar to us, because silence has become rare in the modern world. Now, in this world where people are obsessed with so-called growth, development, in terms of financial development, growth, people are obsessed with all type of busy life, hectic life, and that is why he says a life in which silence should be enjoyed has become something very rare, and that is why this silence is very, very important to break the life of hectic activities. Keeping quiet is one powerful way of escaping the mechanistic motion of the modern world. Now you see, in this modern world, people are always moving about. They are always totally in a state of action. That's why the poet persuades, he requests the people that let us keep quiet, let us stay away from all these type of actions, and let us sit in silence and try to introspect our life. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. Now you see, two type of things he is trying to say. One is fishermen who are busy about fishing the sea, they will not hurt the whales, meaning they will not do any harm to the whales. And the men who are at the salt mine, they will have some time to look at their hurt hands. So, in line with this political ideology, Neruda was intensely aware of the exploitative economic structures of the capitalist economy, which has exploited man and animals alike. Now, Neruda, the poet, is trying to highlight the exploitative capitalistic structure, the economy, which is always in favor of the capitalistic society. They have tried to really harm the nature, and that is why he is trying to address this issue. Neruda was painfully aware of the history of exploitative colonial practices used by European settlers in their bid to extract resources from the American. He was also equally aware of the exploitative neo-colonialistic practices carried out in his own times by large, that is by mostly Americans, corporatives. In fact, he has written a poem titled Standard Oil Company, speaking against the oil drilling practices of corporate giants, which posed a great threat to marine life. Neruda was vocal about his support for the conservation of marine resources and marine life, which is reflected in many of his poems. Now, man's greed not only leads to the exploitation of the other creatures, but of the fellow human beings who are oppressed by the unjust economic system. So he is trying to address two type of things. One is preservation of the Mother Earth, environment. Another one is social justice. Now, man, because of his greed, he is so greedy that he wants to possess everything for himself, and that is why there is so much of exploitation of nature that is happening. And Neruda strongly sympathized with the working class and very well understood the strong class divisions that had fractured the Chilean society. The sufferings of both the workers in the salt mines and the sea creature in the ocean would end for a moment if only everybody kept quiet. So, in the process of exploiting the nature, they are doing a lot of harm to the creatures in the sea. That is why he has used the word whales. It is not only whales, even other forms of fish. So, they have tried to exploit the nature, and also there is so much of division, there is so much of inequality in the society, and that is why the people working in the salt mine, they are again symbolical representation of the poor people. There are some time who have been exploited thoroughly by this capitalist society. There are some time to look at their hurt hands. Why the hands are hurt? Because of their hard work. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. Now you see, the poet is trying to address three types of wars. Green wars, wars with the gas, wars with the fire. What is this green war? Green war, that is against the nature. You try to really spoil the nature by polluting it. So green war. Wars with the gas, it's a chemical war, and wars with the fire, it is a conventional war with auto bombs. So three types of wars he is trying to address. These lines highlight the devastating consequences of war. It seems that all the troubles in the world, from the plight of the whales to the horrors of war, result from someone's inability to keep quiet. The war is the result of someone's inability to keep quiet. War is also a result of disturbed mindset. Somebody in some corner of the world takes an unnecessary action which jeopardizes, putting the people in trouble, the fate of everybody else. By writing about those who prepare wars, the speaker hints at the manufactured nature of war, which is intended to satisfy specific interests of interested parties and devastate the lives of others. The damage done by the conventional, chemical and biological weapons. That is why conventional war, that is a war with fire, chemical, war with the gas, and biological weapons, that is green war. So, can be stopped only if when governments and nations teach themselves to keep quiet. Neruda had been a witness to the atrocities committed during the Spanish Civil War under the regime of dictator General Franco. He had seen war in close quarters and very well knew what victory with no survivors looked like. Now you see there, green war, wars with the gas, wars with the fire, which are manufactured by the people who with the vested interest, they will result in victory with no survivors. It's a great tragedy. What is the use of victory of someone with no survivors left? So what he says, if we keep carrying on this type of, if we keep manufacturing this type of war, the whole world will be depleted with no human beings. There won't be anybody to survive. The war began from, that's why he says, the war began for me when my friends started disappearing. If only we could keep quiet, people waging such wars would put on clean clothes, free the bloodstains and guilt, and would be able to walk hand in hand with the brothers in the shade in silence and peace. So if we do away with such type of wars, we can surely join hands with one another and we can march together in peace and stay in silence under the shade of peace. What I want not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. So the poet makes it very clear that what he is advocating shouldn't be confused with total inactivity, for total inactivity means death, and he has nothing to do with death. In his own words, I have no truck with death. So he says what he means by total silence, it doesn't mean that you sit idle doing nothing, he's not advocating total inactivity. No, it doesn't mean that you don't work, you don't earn your livelihood, not that way. What he says, you be silent, spend some time in total self-introspection, but then my intention, my meaning should not be confused with total inactivity. Why? Total inactivity leads to death. And he says, I have no association with death, because death is of the people who have nothing to look for, but he is all for life, all for hope. If we are not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. These are perhaps some of the most insightful of lines in this poem, where a stark reality of the modern life is highlighted, of being intensely caught up in the web of rush and activity to the extent of not understanding ourselves. We are so much involved in activity that we do not have time to understand ourselves, and that is why this silence will interrupt. It will do some good to you. The sound of silence is much more powerful. It will make you think about yourself. It will give you time for self-introspection. It is tragedy of the modern world where people are too busy to live. There is difference between being alive and living. People are just alive. They are just surviving, not living their life. Living life means enjoying every moment of your life. That is called living. But he says people are not living, people are just alive. If everybody kept quiet for a single moment, a huge silence may interrupt the sadness of being too busy to understand ourselves. Our inability to keep quiet results in our failure to understand ourselves and others. Why we are not able to keep quiet? Because we find it so hard to introspect. The moment you try to understand yourselves, you feel disturbed, and this silence can be disturbing. So that is why he says people are quite afraid to keep quiet, to keep silent. That is why he says it is really going to be the silence that happens out of introspection is going to be really disturbing, and that disturbance can cause self-transformation. The monotonous rush of life makes individuals threaten oneself with death, and their failure to keep quiet make nations threaten each other with war. So when the moment you are not able to keep quiet and spend the time in silence, it results in destructive activities in the form of war. Thus, the silence which results from keeping quiet isn't only an exotic one, it is also an introspective one. It is not going to be the silence that comes out of being quiet. It's not only rare, but it's also going to be introspective and looking into oneself. It is soothing silence that can heal the self-inflicted wounds of humanity. This silence is not something dumb. This is going to be soothing. It is going to cure the wounds that is caused due to the vested interest of the people. The poem ends on a positive note by saying that perhaps we can learn the importance of keeping quiet from nature. Perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I will count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. These lines bring to light a very important fact. That is, that mere movement and rush should not be confused with life. Life is not just moving about earning your livelihood. Life is more of living, and that's what the poet is trying to highlight. We are often obsessed with the so-called movement of earning our livelihood. Of course, we need to earn our livelihood, but then we should not be, we are so much lost in speed and rush life that we fail to live our life. And that's why he says, it should not be, the movement and rush should not be confused with the life. Perhaps this is the mistake we have been committing all our lives. We have been spending our life in just earning our livelihood, and we are caught up in this vicious circle of being in a state of pace. We have confused movement with life. Perhaps this is why we need to keep quiet, to know the difference between mindless movement and meaningful living. There is difference between living and being alive. If the people who are lost in rush and movement, they are just alive. But people who are introspective, those who are reflecting about their life, they are living our life. That is the difference between being alive and living. Perhaps this realization may help us appreciate life, and perhaps this is the reason why the poet helps us remain with this realization before quietly exiting the scene, letting us fully understand and appreciate what it means to keep quiet. So dear students, the whole gist of the poem is that life is all about living. It is not all about being alive. And when you can live your life, you will be able to meaningfully live your life only the moment you are introspective. You are trying to understand your life. You are trying to meaningfully give expressions to your life. And that is where life becomes meaningful, rich. Thank you so much.